a mirror, a candle, and a name spoken 3 times. It's a game whispered at sleepovers, played in school bathrooms, and dared on Halloween nights. We all know the rules. Stand in the dark before a mirror, say her name, Bloody Mary, and wait. Some say her ghost appears, pale and veiled in blood. Others claim she screams or reaches through the glass to scratch your eyes. Sometimes she whispers secrets. Sometimes she drags you into the mirror forever. It sounds like a playground prank, a childish dare to frighten your friends. But this ritual is older, stranger, and far darker than it seems. Because the Bloody Mary legend didn't begin in American suburbia. Her story winds back through centuries of superstition, back through old Europe, and even further into beliefs about mirrors and spirits that stretch 1,000 years into the past. We're going to peel back the glass to see what stares back from the other side. Before we uncover the secret history, let's begin with what most people know, the modern Bloody Mary game. It usually starts in childhood, often around the age when fear and curiosity begin to blur. You've probably heard a version. Say her name 3 times or 13. Sometimes you need a candle, sometimes running water. Sometimes you must spin in a circle or prick your finger to drip blood into the sink. The rules shift from town to town, but the promise is always the same. Summon her spirit. And who is she? Ask children, and the answers vary. Some say she's a murdered woman seeking revenge. Others say she's the ghost of a witch, or a mother who killed her children. Sometimes she's said to be Mary Worth, a supposed witch executed centuries ago. More often, she's simply Bloody Mary. No backstory needed, only terror. But legends do not spring from nothing. And even the simplest of games has roots that sink deep into the soil of history. To understand who Bloody Mary really is, we have to go back 5 centuries to a queen whose name became a curse. And then further still, into the long night of superstition, when mirrors were never just glass, but doorways. Because the Bloody Mary in your bathroom mirror is not just a ghost story. She is the echo of an ancient ritual, older than you think. The year is 1553. England is torn apart by faith and fire. A woman ascends the throne, Mary Tudor, daughter of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. History would remember her by another name, Bloody Mary. To her supporters, she was a rightful queen, restoring Catholic faith after years of Protestant reform. To her enemies, she was a tyrant, a zealot who drenched her kingdom in blood. During her brief 5-year reign, hundreds of Protestants were burned alive at the stake. Bishops, preachers, and ordinary citizens alike became martyrs in the flames. This earned her the title she carries to this day, Bloody Mary, the queen who turned execution into spectacle, who made the English countryside glow with fire and screams. It's easy to see why later generations would imagine her spirit lurking in mirrors. A woman infamous for blood and vengeance, said to haunt the living even after death. To this day, some versions of the game insist that when you summon Bloody Mary, it is the Queen herself who answers. But the story doesn't end there, because Mary Tudor is only one face of the legend, not its origin. In truth, the mirror ritual began long before Tudor England, and long before the name Bloody Mary was spoken. Mirrors themselves are the key. Today, they're ordinary objects, shiny glass in a frame. But for much of human history, mirrors were rare, costly, and deeply mysterious. They seemed to capture more than just a reflection. Many believed they held a fragment of the soul. In Roman superstition, breaking a mirror meant 7 years of bad luck, because the soul itself was thought to shatter. In parts of Europe, mirrors were covered after a death, so the spirit of the deceased wouldn't become trapped inside. To gaze too long into a mirror by candlelight was considered dangerous. you might glimpse more than your own face. You might see what waited beyond. And so, centuries before children dared each other to chant Bloody Mary, young women in England and Scotland stood before mirrors on Halloween night, holding candles, whispering spells, but they weren't summoning ghosts, they were searching for the faces of their future husbands. This strange ritual, called mirror divination, would change everything. Because sometimes, instead of love, it was said a woman might see death itself staring back. And in that moment, the modern legend of Bloody Mary began to take shape. Imagine a darkened room, a single candle flickering beside a mirror. A young woman leans forward, eyes wide, whispering a charm as she peers into the glass. This wasn't a game for children. It was deadly serious. From the 17th century onward, folklore across Britain and early America told of young women who could discover their future husbands through rituals on Halloween night, a night when the veil between the living and the dead was thought to be thin. The most famous method was mirror scrying. The instructions were simple, though unsettling. Stand before a mirror with a candle, sometimes holding an apple or combing your hair, and call upon fate to reveal the face of the man you would marry. If the ritual succeeded, his reflection would appear behind you. But there was a risk. Instead of a lover's face, you might see a skull. And that meant death before marriage. These rituals weren't confined to one village or one century. Variations appeared across Europe and later in colonial America. Girls tossed apple peels over their shoulders, believing the fallen peel would spell out their beloved's initials. They walked backwards into darkened rooms, mirrors in hand, waiting for a face to flicker in the candlelight. Always the same principle. The mirror was more than a reflection. It was a doorway, a threshold between now and what was to come. But thresholds are dangerous places, and sometimes what stepped through was not what anyone hoped to see. Over time, these divinations blurred with stories of spirits and ghosts. By the 19th century, people whispered warnings. Never try the ritual alone, never linger too long, or something else might appear. A shadow, a woman in blood, a figure who did not belong. And this is where history and legend entwine. The old rituals of love and fate began to merge with the bloody reputation of Mary Tudor. In one story, a girl gazing into the mirror might see the Queen herself, grim, vengeful, her face pale and streaked with blood. In another, she would not reveal a husband, but instead strike fear into anyone foolish enough to look for her. Thus the path was set. What began as a hopeful glimpse of the future turned into a terrifying summoning. And by the time the 20th century arrived, the figure in the mirror was no longer a husband-to-be. She was Bloody Mary. Why mirrors? Why do they hold such power in our fears and our folklore? To answer that, we must go back, more than 1,000 years, to civilizations where mirrors were not just furniture, but sacred. The Romans believed mirrors could trap fragments of the soul. Break one, and you shattered your spirit, leaving yourself cursed for 7 years. The time it supposedly took for the soul to regenerate. This is where our superstition of 7 years bad luck comes from. In ancient Greece, mirrors were used for a practice called Catoptromancy, divination through reflections. A priest or witch would lower a mirror into a pool of water, and the image that appeared would reveal health, fate, or death. Some mirrors were even said to show not the living, but the shadow of what awaited in the underworld. Even further east, in Mesopotamia, polished obsidian mirrors have been unearthed in burial sites, placed with the dead perhaps as tools for their journey into the afterlife. The message was the same. The mirror was not inert. It was alive. It was a portal. And across medieval Europe, that belief endured. Mirrors were veiled in households after a death, so that spirits would not become trapped inside. Some said a demon could crawl out of a mirror, left uncovered at night. Others claimed witches used mirrors to summon familiar spirits, binding them in the glass. All of these traditions circle the same idea. The mirror is not simply an object, it is a threshold, and thresholds are perilous. Now place that belief in the hands of a frightened child in a dark bathroom, a candle flickering, a name repeated again and again like an incantation. Suddenly, the childish dare doesn't feel so childish. It feels like an echo of something much older. The Bloody Mary game is a survival of these ancient mirror rituals, a fragment of Catoptromancy reborn as folklore. A warning that when you stare into the glass too long, you invite something else to stare back. And in the 20th century, when urban legends blossomed, this echo became a phenomenon. Children no longer tried to see husbands or futures in the mirror. They wanted something darker. They wanted the thrill of summoning the blood-streaked woman herself. But how did this European superstition make its way into American basements and school bathrooms? For that, we have to cross the Atlantic and watch as an old-world ritual transforms into a distinctly American nightmare. The Bloody Mary ritual crossed the ocean not in one moment, but in fragments. European immigrants brought their mirror traditions to the New World. Apple peel charms, candlelit divinations, the belief that Halloween night was a dangerous threshold when spirits roamed free. In colonial America, young women gathered on All Hallows' Eve, still gazing into mirrors, hoping to catch a glimpse of their destined husbands. But in a land where folklore blended, rituals shifted. By the 19th century, ghost stories were thriving in America. Warnings whispered around firelight, tales of restless spirits haunting forests, rivers, and graveyards. The mirror rituals slowly absorbed these spectral themes. What once promised a hopeful glimpse of love began to carry a darker risk. By the 20th century, the divination had transformed into a dare. Children dared each other to go alone into a dark bathroom, candle in hand, and speak a name. The mirror had become a stage for terror. The ritual no longer revealed marriage or death. Instead, it promised a direct encounter with the supernatural. And who appeared in the glass? By then, the figure was called Bloody Mary. Her backstory was rarely explained. Sometimes she was a murdered bride, sometimes a vengeful ghost, sometimes the long-dead queen herself. But the details mattered less than the act. The power of the ritual was in the fear, the heart-pounding moment when a child whispered her name and stared into the shadows of their own reflection. Halloween, with its associations of death, spirits, and dares, made the legend thrive. Sleepovers and schoolyards spread it like wildfire. By the 1960s and 70s, folklorists were recording versions of the Bloody Mary game across the United States, each with its own twist. 3 chants or 13, a candle or running water, spin around, scratch your face, prick your finger, each rule layered on by generations of children, amplifying the terror. It was no longer just folklore. It had become a rite of passage, a test of courage that every child eventually faced. And like the best legends, it adapted to its time. In the age of electricity, mirrors still held their power. In the age of horror films, her name still summoned chills. Children who never heard of Mary Tudor or Catoptromancy still knew the rules. Stand in the dark, whisper the name, and wait. But there's one more layer to the legend, one final secret hidden behind the glass. Because Bloody Mary is not just a ghost or a queen. She is part of something much larger, a universal archetype of the weeping, vengeful woman who returns from beyond. Bloody Mary is not alone. Across cultures, we find echoes of her shape. The vengeful woman, the weeping spirit, the ghost who lingers in mirrors, rivers, or doorways. In Japan, children whisper the name of Hanako-san, the spirit of a girl said to haunt school bathrooms. To summon her, you knock 3 times on the stall door and ask if she's there. If she answers, you may not survive what follows. A playground dare, just like Bloody Mary, but rooted in Japanese ghost traditions. In Latin America, there is La Llorona, the weeping woman, who wanders riverbanks crying for the children she drowned. Parents warn children to stay away from the water at night. just as children in America warned each other never to look too long into the mirror. In Slavic folklore, there are stories of spirits caught in reflections, or witches who could trap a soul inside polished glass. In Scotland, the Bean Knee, keens at the water's edge, washing the clothes of those doomed to die. Different names, different rituals, but always the same archetype. A woman tied to grief, vengeance, or premature death, returning as an omen. Psychologists see something deeper at work. The mirror game is often played by children, especially young girls, at sleepovers and parties. Why? Because the figure of Bloody Mary functions as a test. To face the mirror is to face fear itself. Fear of the unknown, fear of growing up, fear of death. A child stares into the glass, and for a heartbeat sees not just a ghostly woman, but the first flickers of their own mortality. And always, she appears as female. Folklorists argue this is no accident. In many cultures, women were seen as keepers of secret knowledge, as midwives, witches, or mourners. To summon a woman in the mirror is to summon not only a ghost, but the very image of mystery, prophecy, and taboo. This is the hidden truth of Bloody Mary. She is not simply Mary Tudor, not simply a schoolyard legend. She is a fragment of a pattern that stretches across continents and centuries. The eternal archetype of the veiled woman who waits at the threshold. But the mirror hides one final revelation, a truth that shows why this game refuses to die, even in our modern world. So why does Bloody Mary endure? Why does a ritual whispered in medieval Europe still echo in American school bathrooms today? Because it serves a purpose. At its heart, the Bloody Mary ritual is a test. It is not about the ghost in the mirror, but about the courage of the one who calls her name. For centuries, humans have used rituals to mark the threshold between childhood and adulthood, between safety and danger, between the living and the dead. The Bloody Mary game is one of those thresholds. Folklorists have documented it for decades. In the 1970s, it appeared in ethnographic studies of playground culture. Children spoke in hushed tones of the girl who scratched out eyes, who left you with claw marks, who dragged you through the mirror. The rules varied, but the fear was the same, and fear was the point. To play Bloody Mary is to feel your pulse race, to laugh nervously with your friends, to prove you are brave enough to face the dark. But behind the laughter, something older moves. Ancient mirror magic, the shadow of Mary Tudor, the archetype of the vengeful woman. Each generation reshapes the story, but the bones remain. A mirror, a name, a reckoning. That is why this legend refuses to fade. Not because children believe a queen's ghost truly lurks in the glass, but because the ritual touches something primal. It asks us to confront our fear of what lies beyond and what lies within. So the next time you find yourself before a mirror in the dark, remember this. You are not just seeing your reflection. You are standing at a doorway used for thousands of years. And if you whisper her name 3 times, 13 times, it doesn't matter. You may discover what countless others already know. The mirror does not lie. The mirror reveals. And sometimes it reveals her.